Hi, Standers. This is Sheila Hollinger from Marriage Revealed Ministries, and today I am going to dive into my overflowing private messages, emails, and even some posts in the groups that we have. So let's get started. The first question I have, well, it's not so much a question, but it's about a feeling of not being validated. So let's talk about this. When you are involved, you have communication with your spouse and, you're just going about your day-to-day life and they're lost, your marriage is struggling, things are not, you're not restored, but you are struggling with certain areas where you are not feeling that you're important to them. You might be feeling like you're being taken advantage of. You're not being validated. You're being used. You have to understand that that's exactly what is happening. They're not validating you. They are not caring about you. They're not putting you and your feelings and your emotions as a priority. That is just the season and the place that they are in. So you will pick up on that. You will feel the part of being unimportant. You'll feel rejected. You will feel that selfishness that will come off of them. Now, what we have to do in that situation, and you have to understand, is this isn't who they are forever, right? This is the season that they're in while they have a hard heart, while they're trying to figure out their identity, while they're being sifted like wheat by Satan, or whatever you want to call it. If they're in the snare of the enemy, if they're lost in their identity, their purpose, if they're struggling, if they're going through bitterness, anger, unforgiveness, if they're going through their own emotional inner healing, you better believe they are going to put themselves first. They're going to, show not caring about you. They're going to reject you. They're going to do all that. And if you allow yourself to take it personal, that this is the season they're in and they don't have time for you, that they're not putting you important, right? If you let that affect you in such a way that it becomes your everything, what happens is you can start getting distracted from the real purpose of this season. This is a season of healing for them, of identity for them, finding out who they are in Christ, or finding out they have absolutely zero relationship with their Creator at all. So, if that's what this is all about, is their souls, their salvation, their purpose, their identity, their brokenness, their part of being lost, yes, they have to go into a season where they're trying to fix this. Now, of course, it does not look anything like what a normal season would look like, where you start to work on yourself and improve yourself. Standards show what it's supposed to look like. You get in the Word. You worship. You seek God. You seek godly help. Lost people do the exact opposite. Okay, they more of pride, not being very humble. They're not seeking God. They're being, in the snare of the enemy. But the same type of situation is happening. I've shared this before where, I walked one way and my husband walked another, and we both wound up coming to the same place in the end. So you're not going to feel validated. You're not going to feel like your spouse is, caring about you. You're going to feel rejected. And it is a hard place to be, but if you keep reminding yourself they're not capable of doing this right now. They're not capable of being kind, of being always considerate of your feelings. They're not capable of this because of what season they are in. And that really does help when you are able to put this into a perspective and an understanding that they're going to have a little bit of more grace and compassion and understanding from you, that this is a season for them to draw close to truth. And to do that, a lot of times they have to completely abandon themselves over to the enemy, to the snare, and they have to get worse. They have to get angrier, they have to get meaner, they have to get, more selfish. A lot of times we see spouses, just completely turn into someone else. And that is part of this process, and it's not easy. So you need to guard yourself. You need to protect yourself by understanding what is going on and not setting yourself up with these expectations that you expect that they are going to love you as they should. They're going to respect you as they should. We put these expectations on them and we say, oh, well, any person, normal person that's following Jesus, that's, loving the Lord, would be loving their wife, would be loving their husband. But obviously we can see from these spouses, they're not loving Jesus. They're not following Jesus. They're not behaving like Jesus. Yet we still put these expectations on them that, we understand, oh, they're lost, they're blind, but we're still putting expectations on them that they need to be treating us exactly like they would if they were submitting and following the Lord. So be very careful about putting, expectations on spouses that are just not capable of doing what we want them to do. Okay, let's go on to the next question here. So the next question is, if circumstances continue to get worse, could that be God letting me know that standing is not for me? Absolutely not. Because I'll tell you right now, when circumstances get worse, it is showing you that what's happening in a spouse's life is that, the walls are closing in on them. They're reacting to you. And I'm going to assume when you say that circumstances are getting worse, that they're treating you harsher. They're maybe distancing themselves. You're just seeing evil become more and more and more evident, right? So we have a tendency to see things like this through the perspective of the worse it gets means we should just run away. But in all reality, the worse it gets means we should see this in a way that we understand that we need to stick with it even more, because that means that they're going darker, they're going deeper into the enemy's grip, or they're finally getting to a place where they're starting to see what's going on. And sometimes that manifests in an anger and a frustration. I'll share that with my husband toward the end, when he really came to the realization that there was no way out of what he was doing, and he had tried everything. He got really aggravated at that end because he knew that there was only one solution left. And it was the one he did not want to do. He wanted to have his freedom and his rebellion. And he wanted to be able to choose his own path. He wanted to walk and do what he wanted to do without surrendering and submitting to God. And so he had tried unsuccessfully over and over and over and over to be able to get a grip on his addictions, his lust. He wanted to be able to stop himself from doing and have these things that he was doing. And every morning when he had failed the night before, he would wake up in a really bad mood. And of course, I'm the one that, suffered the results of that, because, he was so angry that in his eyes, yet again, he failed, that he couldn't stop himself from doing what he didn't want to do. And he would wake up the next day just extremely angry, extremely agitated, because he really thought he would be able to control his life, say no to these temptations that kept coming at him. And that made him really frustrated. It made him really lash out and became more, more discouraged and more, I don't want to say cruel, but just short-tempered. And he wasn't a type of person that had tempers, but you could just see that he was just, losing his cool over the simplest things constantly. He also had a lot of anxiety. He wasn't sleeping. He was just in a serious bad mood. And so for a person that's not understanding this, and if they're seeing this, right, they're seeing someone acting like this, you could look at that and say, oh, God must be telling me that this isn't working and I'm done. I need to get out of here and give up my stand and no longer stand for this person anymore. When in all reality it's actually good news. The spouse is finally coming to see that their efforts just aren't cutting it. And they are getting to a place, just like my husband, where he literally looked at me and said, no, I'm not okay. I have to go to church. And you could see he was very aggravated with that fact, that he was basically saying, I am stuck in a trap and I don't want to surrender my life to God, but I'm really coming to the realization that that is the only way I'm going to get out of this trap. I'm going to get out of being snared by one thing to now put myself purposely into another snare. And that was really what I feel with my husband, was that he was seeing God as he lived in my domination and my control for so long. And that he had finally gotten some freedom to do what he wanted to do, live his life the way he wanted to live. And it was like, he didn't see it, but he had stepped out of one prison and put himself into another prison. He stepped out of my control, put himself straight into the enemy's prison. But only he thought, at that time, he thought it was his freedom. And a lot of times that you don't, people that are, walking in rebellion don't realize that rebellion, which they think is freedom, really is a prison. Because now you're snared by the enemy and you can't be set free until you do what you consider now to be another prison, become slaves for Christ. He didn't want to submit. He did not want to realize, to him that meant, great, now I've got to go to church. Now I've got to give up my Sundays. Now I can't, mess up. Whatever was going through his mind, he had this list of, I've been, for 7 years now, I've gotten to be bad, and I've gotten to use the excuse that, I'm having whatever I'm going through, and I get to do whatever I want. And if I decide I want to stay out all night, or if I decide I want to go to a party, if I decide I want to do this or that or whatever, he had given himself this permission that he got to do this. And he realized that had to change. He could not give his life back to Jesus, start going to church, and get to enjoy all those things that he had been enjoying, for 7 years. And he actually would brag about those things that he was getting to enjoy now, that this freedom, this party, this whatever, and he knew, and he didn't want to give it up, but he knew it was time. And he was aggravated. He was frustrated. He was really at a place in his life that he was like, I've got to do this and I'm not happy about it. So that is where a lot of his anger, his frustration was coming from. So with that perspective, if you're seeing a spouse, they're getting more angry, they're getting more frustrated, they're just getting more aggravated at life, at you, they're taking it out on you, they're reacting harsher and doing things. That's conviction. That's so many different things, but it is not God saying to you, it's time to move on. It's time to give up your stand. I'll tell you that, people that hear those things, they're really not hearing God say that. They're hearing through their own feelings. They're hearing through their own frustrations, their own aggravation, their own whatever. But that's not how God works. God doesn't usually work through those types of, situations to tell you it's time to move on. It's actually the opposite. It's usually when he says, no, press in. Things are getting tougher. The storm's getting more intense. Press in. Okay? I just want to encourage you to be really careful how you take external circumstances like this and draw your own conclusions and lean on your own understanding to think that God is telling you that it's time to move on and turn a spouse over, to the enemy, and you just walk away. So you got to be really careful about looking at circumstances like that. Another question. Everything that I have prayed against is happening. Why would God allow this? Okay, so this is a question that I get actually quite a bit. That the very thing that you prayed for the divorce not to happen, you prayed for your spouse not to, move in with the other person, marry the other person. There's a lot of things that we set up as, I would even call them, we set them up as, if this happens, I'm done. If they divorce me, I'm finished. If, they marry the other person, I'm finished. If they have a child with the other person, I'm finished. So this is you setting up your own rules, your own, standing clauses of what you are willing to tolerate. This isn't God's agenda. Could you imagine if God set up his own agenda with these clauses and said, as soon as Sheila does this, I'm done with her. I'm giving up on her. God does not set that up with us, okay? He doesn't say, if someone does this, then they've crossed the line and there's no coming back from that. Yet we do that. We set ourselves up in these ways that say, if this happens and this happens and this happens, I will never survive it. It's going to be too much pain. It's going to be unbearable, and I just won't do it. And we think that by telling that to God, we think, honestly, we really do think that if we say that to God, I won't survive it, that we're going to make him say, yup, she's right, she's not going to survive that, or he's not going to be able to handle this, and I'm going to stop it. And unfortunately, sin has a reaping and sowing type consequence. When you sow, you reap. And sometimes spouses have to see that divorcing you isn't going to solve what they thought it was going to solve. Sometimes they have to see, oh, okay, I divorced and it didn't take away the guilt. It didn't take away the empty feeling. So maybe now I have to marry this person. If God is after their soul, if God is after their heart, if God is after turning their life around and making them see that living their life the way they want to live it is not working for them, there's no way that God is going to put up these boundaries to stop you from getting devastated by them divorcing you. Or he's not going to stop them from marrying the other person. Because if that was the case, think about it. How many standers have been through divorce? How many standers have watched their spouse marry the other person? Okay? So, we have to be really careful when we do these kind of things where we're saying there's no way that God is going to let them divorce me, or there's no way God's going to let them marry the other person. Yet all around us, we're seeing the spouses divorcing, we're seeing them, marrying the other person. And so you have to be really careful about the type of stipulations that you place on God. And, there's one thing when God tells you himself that this isn't going to happen. But when you tell him you're not going to tolerate something, like, I'm done, then you're basically saying, God, this is my stand. I'm setting the rules up, and you have to follow my rules. And this isn't how it works. God is after their souls. He's after their obedience. He's after their hearts, their minds, right? That's what God is after. And when that is, part of it, the marriage restoration is supposed to be part of that as well. So if you're in it for one thing and not the other, that's going to set you up for failure. It's going to set you up for putting up these clauses and telling God that you're only going to stand a certain way. God wants you to trust him with everything. That includes if there's a divorce. It includes if there's a remarriage. It just includes so much more than we're willing. And you have to ask yourself, why am I putting up these stipulations and these clauses? Am I making this something that's going to be an impossible that I won't be able to survive? 9 out of 10 times when we do that to God, when we say there's no way I'm going to survive this, God's going to say, yeah, you will, and I'll take you through it and show you that you can survive it. And you'll see it time and time again with the standers and the groups. Standers everywhere, that what they thought they couldn't survive, they very much could survive with his help. And it was because they had to go, deeper, next level with God and press in. And, if you're going to walk away because you believe that you can't handle the divorce, then you're limiting God and what he can do through you and how he can help you. You're saying that this is a giant that can't be won. This is a giant that's going to destroy me, and I'm gonna just walk away now, instead of giving God a chance to see me through it. So again, just be careful about how you set up your rules, with standing. God never told me to stand. Does that mean that he's not calling me? We hear that quite a bit. God never called you to stand, but did he ever tell you not to stand? That's something to think about. He doesn't always speak the words. He speaks through our desires, our hearts. If our hearts are to be lined up with his, right? The fact that you want to stand and fight for your marriage, the fact that you want to see your spouse serving God, walking in God's will, the fact that you want to see your family healed and whole, that to me reflects the heart of the Father. What doesn't reflect the heart of the Father would be someone who wants to divorce, wants to walk away, wants to not care anymore, wants to, move on, find someone else, enter into another relationship, while they have a spouse who is lost, broken, deceived, and deeply, in need of their prayers, in need of their love, in need of their standing for them. To me, that does not reflect the heart of God. But standing for someone, praying for them, interceding for them, believing, hoping for their relationship to turn around. And then while you're doing all that, you are working out the pain, the suffering that it takes, because standing brings pain, it brings suffering, and you've got to learn how to go to God through that. So yes, that to me reflects the Word of God, reflects the character of God, reflects the nature of God. Standing reflects God. So do you need to hear God speak the words, I want you to stand? No. You just have to have that desire in your heart that lines up with his character and nature to know that you're doing the right thing. Someone's asking if I can explain a little bit more about false starts. So I have done quite a bit of videos on this and teachings, and I have talked about it. I'm trying to think, what else can I say in addition? the concept of a false start is really actually quite simple. You don't ever have to have a false start. A false start is when you believe honestly and sincerely that you are being restored, that your spouse is home, or speaking of coming home, and you believe it, and you run and you start running that, you start, saying we're restored or we're being restored, and the next thing you know, you're not. So that would be a false start because you jumped the gun. You thought that restoration was happening. You got ahead of God. So that is a false start. Okay? Can you go through everything I just described? Your spouse comes home. Your spouse is the one believing that they're about to recommit and rededicate. They can have a false start, but you don't have to. You could go through all of that, not in fear, but walking in wisdom. Okay? A false start is your belief system. That's all it is. You could literally just wake up one day and create a false start. You believe that your spouse is coming home and they've never indicated anything. Maybe they sent a text or something, and you set yourself up and you truly, honestly believe this is it. This is the beginning of restoration, even though your spouse really didn't do anything. Maybe they just told you they missed you, or they told you they were sorry, or whatever, and you took it and started to run the race of restoration. So that's how false starts can really look so different from every situation, from person to person, because it's what you believe. That's a false start. A false start is when you believe that you heard the go signal and you started running toward the finish line to find out that no, that wasn't it. So you can walk in wisdom and just walk in the moment and enjoy the moment. Enjoy that spouse who's, softening their heart. Enjoy the lesson that they're going through. Get to enjoy that you show them the new you that's changed. That you're not, whatever it is that you were before. We go through so many wonderful changes. We're more peaceful. We're more kind. We're more considerate. We're more compassionate. We're more forgiving. We're more graceful. We go through a lot of really wonderful changes during our stand because we're spending more and more time with him. We are showing his behavior to our spouses. So that's a really great thing. So you can go through all of that knowing that, this could be, this could be the start of restoration. It could not be. Who knows? But I'm going to enjoy the moment, and I'm going to enjoy, getting to spend time with my spouse. And then, will that bring some hope that you're hoping? But it doesn't create a false start. And the thing about false starts is when you really do believe and you put all of your hope that this is it, this is restoration, and then it turns out to not be restoration, that, for whatever reason, what happens is it can really devastate you. You could become so crushed, so hurt, so angry. And it's because you believed this was it. You believed the spouse when they said, I'm sorry, I want to come home, I want to make this work. So when and if your spouse does say those things, you need to take what they're saying and go to God and say, this is what they're saying. What do you say? Is this it? And I do caution that a spouse that tells you they're sorry but doesn't tell God they're sorry is still snared, is still trapped, is still open to influence. So a lot of times that you can go through reconciliation with the spouse, but that's completely different than what a true heart change and heart repentance is. You really want to see a spouse turning to God, because that shows that they are understanding what was broken in the first place. So I hope that clarified and gave a little bit more insight and understanding into false starts. Okay, and the last question I'm going to do is someone is writing about being tormented day and night over their spouse and images and thoughts of them being with another person. Oh boy, yeah, that is a really tough thing. And I do understand the pain that we go through when we let ourselves go there in our minds, and those flashes, those thoughts, they can come out of nowhere. And this is what I would do this is what I did actually when those things would come at me. A lot of times I didn't catch it right away, and I would let myself go down that rabbit hole. The image, the thought, whatever it was would come at me, and I would just let it, just follow it. It's like a little bit of a snare, and you just follow it. And the next thing you know, hours later, and you're devastated and you're a mess, and you've been, you've let that thought, that image take you to a really bad place. And I had to learn that when those thoughts, those images were coming at me, that it was most likely, it could be my insecurity, my fear, my anger, my pain, whatever it was, or it could have been the enemy, putting that in front of me. And I had to take it captive right then and there and submit it to the mind of Christ. And I had to say, no, not doing this. And I had to talk back to it, and I had to speak to it, and I had to say, yeah, I'm sure this is exactly what it looks like, what it feels like, but I don't have to listen to you, and I don't have to believe that this is, whatever you're trying to make me believe and feel. And I would just start speaking truth about it. And I would say, this is not going to be forever. This is not a love situation. This is just a lust situation, or this is an infatuation, whatever it is that you say to yourself. And then I would speak forgiveness and healing, and I would say, God, your son needs you to get out of this snare. He needs you. He's your son. Speak to his heart. Show him that this is not a replacement for you. This is not where you want him to be. This person is not for him. This is not his helpmeet. And I would just start speaking everything that I could think of to encourage myself and to speak against the lie that was trying to get me to believe what it was presenting. So, the more we entertain these thoughts and these feelings and these emotions and these snares that come at us, the more easily we will get snared right away when they come at us. So you've got to learn right away to take those thoughts captive. Now, I'm going to say this. If that thought comes and you don't want to take it captive, and you want to entertain it, and you want to give it mind time, you want to ponder it, you want to meditate on it, that's most likely a type of feeling sorry for yourself, or trying to maybe rewrite it to make it sound better or look better, or or you just stuck in a self-pity and victim type situation where you're playing that out in your mind because that's the only comfort that you're getting. You might not feel that God cares, and you might not feel comforted by God. So you'll go there in your mind, and you'll let that, emotion, that feeling, that, you'll let pride rise up in you, and you'll let pride be your comforter, and you'll let pride bring what you don't feel you're getting from the Lord. And that is a very real thing that we do sometimes when we entertain self-pity, is because we think, well, God is not going to comfort me. God is not going to heal me and help me. So I'm going to do it myself. And that's the way we do it, through feeling sorry for ourselves, through wallowing in these places of, this victimization. It doesn't do any good. You're not drawing closer to God. You're not speaking truth. You're not helping your situation at all. And you're just hurting yourself. So you've got to take those thoughts captive, make them submit to, to God's character, to his nature, to his love for you, right? You've got to want and desire that, to do that. And if you're not, you've got to start confessing, God, I'm getting something out of these little pity parties that I go to. I haven't learned how to connect with you to where I'm not giving up these places that I keep going to and finding myself in. I don't understand you. Help me understand how you feel about me, how you're caring about me. Help me understand that it's not about feeling that you're there, but it's about knowing and believing that you're there, that you love me. A lot of times that, when we live off of feelings, we get snared into feeling self-pity because it's a feeling, instead of knowing that God loves you and God cares about you and God doesn't want to see you wallowing in these places of self-pity because they're not doing anything good for you. These are places of lies, but it is a place where we do wind up comforting ourselves. That's why self-pity can be so strong, and we just can't seem to break out of it. It's because it's giving us something. We usually stay snared when we're getting something out of something. Okay, so this is going to wrap up our first Q&A session. If you guys enjoyed this, I know it's kind of all over the place, but this was a new thing. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and let me know in the comments what you thought. And you guys could leave questions in the comments, and I can go and do another one of these question and answers. All right, God bless you guys.